Hello, and welcome to the Eleemosynary Moment. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I am Brad Hathcock.
Good afternoon, Bradley.
Good afternoon, Aaron.
Okay, so I am something of an expert on boats. I'm a boat expert.
I did not know that about you.
Yeah. I learned about boats over the past, let's say, 36 hours. I know everything about the shipping industry now. I know a lot about bridges. So I can
ironically enough, I am a bridge expert.
That's great news. So what we should do now is talk about, as experts, the Baltimore bridge collapse. Ready? Go.
Bridge fell down.
It did. So this ship
bridge goes boom.
I have some information in front of me. It had 1.5 million gallons of fuel on board.
Good.
It had 4,700 cargo containers.
Accurate.
56 of those had hazardous material on them.
I
knew that. 2 containers went overboard, and they did not have hazardous material.
Back. Sure they didn't.
An additional 13 containers on the bow of the ship were damaged.
Into the river.
Yeah. And also 6 people are missing. Apparently they were workers.
They're dead.
On the bridge?
Remember when they said those people in the submarine went missing? Like, missing in the submarine? No, they're dead. That water was apparently 41 degrees. I am also a river water temperature expert. I studied this extensively for about 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it just so happens that when a ship that weighs... you're the boat expert, so you'll tell me how much it weighs.
14 billion pounds.
14 billion pounds happens to crash into a main bridge structure, also known as possibly a strut. It will fucking collapse. And people, I don't know if you know this, but when bridges collapse, when people are on them, that's not good. They tend to, not stay in the air due to gravity. Just kind of sucks them down to the ground. In this case, the water. And that's where we stand today.
I believe that is
bridge
physics.
Standing, boat crashes, bridge no longer standing. I mean, that's just physics. I'm also a physicist, as we well know.
I know. Yeah. I'm well aware of that, Mr. Newton. I learned today that there are things called fenders that you can put on the base of these struts. That's what we're going to call them. And apparently that can deflect boats. But
sort of. I mean,
I don't know if you could deflect a 15 billion ton boat.
No, especially not when it hits head on. And where are you deflecting it to? It hits you directly on.
Yeah, I don't think this was a preventable accident.
You cannot.
Yeah.
Since I'm the bridge expert, I will tell you, you cannot. Especially given all of that cargo and everything on top. I don't know if your weight accounted for all of the cargo in that or not, but things did not look good for that bridge. Now, I had heard that they pulled some people out of the water. I don't have a count, but I know that was like 3 people were safe and one was critically, like in critical condition. And then I believe there's 6 more people they know are missing. It was 7 vehicles and 1 tractor trailer went into the water.
Yeah, and it could have been actually a lot worse because apparently the people on the cargo ship were able to tell somebody on the land to block the bridge. Mayday.
Yeah, so there was actually construction workers working on that bridge who subsequently are now probably laid off, since they lost the project that they were supposed to be working on. Or now they'll have extensive work to do. Who knows? What we do know is the federal government has pledged that they will pay 100% for this bridge, which makes no fucking sense because there should be insurance involved from the ship that struck it. and I'm sure something will have to come of that with an investigation. But the video that I saw, as well as I'm sure you saw, was that the ship lost power twice before
Mm-hmm.
before it crashed into the bridge. But they also called in a mayday, which they are now saying may have saved a number of lives because they were able to clear most of the bridge before the ship hit it. So that's, I guess, good news.
Well, uh, now I'm not going to talk like an expert anymore. I'm surprised there's not like a backup system on these things. Like the power could just go out. Seems kind of crazy to me.
I'm sure there is some kind of backup power, but the power went off and then back on and then off again. And I don't know how, because like if you see the boat like kind of lost its steering too a little bit. So I don't know how those power systems work. You're the ship's expert. But you know, I guess it happens, but this is a pretty big disaster, both commercially and obviously personally for whomever happens to die from this, which sucks. But they're already talking about having basically another supply chain crisis because this was a key bridge for people to kind of go from like north of the Mason-Dixon line to south of the Mason-Dixon line for trucking and all that kind of stuff because there's two other alternate routes, and well, technically three, two of which I believe have tunnels which you are not allowed to put hazardous material through via
Ah,
trucks. So there's now only like one route for trucks to be able to go that are holding hazardous materials and stuff like that. So uh, they're talking about kind of like a looming crisis here in terms of uh, delivery and shipping. So we'll see.
yeah. I believe that port is the ninth or 10th largest in the country. Um, and
But
yeah,
this
I
wouldn't be the first time. I mean, the one
mm-mm.
in California is what, like the number one, and ships were just sitting off of that port for months because of everything with COVID going on, and then the supply crisis there. So we will prevail. This is America. This is what we do. We just prevail over everything. This, naturally what we do. Um, so we're gonna keep on trucking.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, just to keep this afloat, I wanted to mention that the fuel weighed according to my calculations, 9,228,000 pounds.
Hmm. Is there
So,
any? I would wonder if there's any damage to the ship itself. Like, I didn't see any reports of it leaking
hmm,
anything into the river or anything like that. So I
I didn't
have to
either.
assume that there was no structural damage to the ship.
I guess the reason why the federal government would pay for it is because it's an interstate thing, but I don't know. Also, while you bring up the hazardous material, I guess because of the tunnels situation, everything that's hazardous waste and material, whatever, that comes out of Washington in that area, that beltway, they
I
say.
didn't know they were shipping politicians on trucks.
Ah,
ah,
it's our number one export, Brad.
what
Um,
shitty politicians. Yeah,
yeah.
that's actually true.
Uh, anyway, that's like the number one story on the internet right now. But what's interesting is the downstream effects. So, we had we've had a lot of weird stuff happen under this administration. We've had the East Palestine train crash. We've had this, and neither of these are their fault necessarily. I'm just saying like how they respond matters, I guess. There was the baby formula shortage, which is still an issue apparently. Um,
Really? I mean, that happened again during the pandemic. So the fact that that's still an issue is kind of hilarious. My dad told me a story once, like even from when I was a kid back in the 80s and 90s, late 80s for me, but early 90s, like diapers and formula were an issue then as well. Um,
hmm.
like you would go to certain places, especially because diapers were expensive, and like Toys R Us, I guess, had like the cheapest diapers. So they would go to the store, get a voucher, and then once the truck came in, you would use your voucher and actually get your diapers right off the truck.
Huh.
And that was, I mean, it's anecdotal, obviously, because that's what he told me. But how would I know? I was a fucking baby. But it seems like child items, in my opinion, since we're having this issue now, have probably been an issue for the last 30 or so years. Probably even going back further.
My guess is that the elites in the coastal areas don't have this as a problem really, and then
No, they're
because they
hoarding
don't
it
have,
all.
because they're hoarding it all, and then because they can afford not to have those problems, then they don't really talk about and or cover it in the media, and so these stories kind of go like undercovered, which is probably why this is still a problem. And the only way we can address it because of our laws is to import it from other countries. And now that I'm talking about it out loud, I believe we've talked about this before, that we imported baby formula to solve the problem
We did, yes.
because of the
Now,
FDA.
it's kind of funny how, you kind of talked about structurally, like how this works, and obviously with like East Palestine and stuff, and it's like how the federal government responds to this. They really didn't respond to the East Palestine situation. Joe Biden literally didn't go there for well over a year, to the point where their mayor was like, the only time you should even come through here is when you're doing like a book tour after you retire.
Mm,
He didn't want him there at all. And you know, they kept talking about how this was Donald Trump's fault because of deregulation of the train industry and like all that other shit. Um, and that's been happening for decades, I'm sure. So it's not just a Trump issue. But how are they going to spin that for this? This ship wasn't even a U.S. based ship. It was from Dali or some shit like that, which I don't even know where the fuck that is. And it was heading to Sri Lanka. So it was like picking up items here and just to take them to Sri Lanka. So um, who knows? Like, I don't think it's a U.S. owned ship, unless the company that owns the ship is U.S. based, which is possible. It's some
yeah, I don't
company
think
with
it
an A.
was.
I don't even know what the company's name was, but I believe it begins with an A. I heard it before, but I don't remember it offhand.
Yeah. Well, we're experts on for global trade as well, so it's important that we touch on that. Do you have anything else to add about the train thing?
No.
Or not the train? Oh no. Actually, not the train thing. It was a bridge, but the reason why I thought train was because Biden said he used to take the train over that
Yeah.
bridge,
Yeah.
and which there never
So a
was a
train
train.
has never gone over that bridge. It does not have
No.
tracks. But yes, of course, Joe Biden said he used to ride the train back and forth over that bridge because he's a fucking mush brain. And, by all means, let's elect him again in 2024.
Super liar. I saw this old video of him on the McLaughlin group. Do you know what the McLaughlin group is?
Vaguely.
It's like something that the old people watched when we were young, and they were like shredding him in this old clip from when he ran for president in like '88.
But
And
it's true, okay? He's been quote unquote forgetful for like his entire fucking career. Ultimately, he's also been a liar and a racist his entire fucking career. But all of a sudden, he's none of those things because at least he's not Donald Trump. That's exactly why he got elected in the first place. Let's make no mistake about it. Nobody actually wanted Joe Biden. It's just who could be controlled, and you can't throw Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump again because she already fucking lost. So you can't be embarrassed again. And now they're gonna trot this bullshit out again. I mean, Trump is no fucking savior. He's having his brain meltdowns too and saying more and more up there authoritarian shit. So he doesn't look good either. But this is exactly why, since I started getting more involved in politics and things like that, I've always championed for a third party. Okay, whether or not it's a great third party is irrelevant. The way it looks right now is the Republican Party is dying. Okay, they are stuck to Donald Trump. That's going to continue for 20 to 30 years. no doubt about it, because they have nothing. And they're just gonna whomever the next person is, and they've already tried to do it with DeSantis and I forget who else, Vivek Ramaswamy, as he's the next Donald Trump. Like that's just what they're gonna keep doing. Is Democrats are gonna keep pushing him back and saying that like it's Donald Trump at 2.0, you know. So the Republican Party ultimately is dying, and there is no replacement for it at this time because we don't have third parties. You have this what are they called? The
Labels.
no labels party, who doesn't even have a candidate yet, but they're working on ballot access. You have RFK Jr., who just announced his VP, who is
Nicole
like
something.
a fucking billionaire. She has like $4 billion, and that was
Nicole
definitely
Sheridan?
something like that.
Shanahan?
Yeah. She was obviously a pick to help push his campaign up and get more funding, which hopefully works out. I, again, we're seeing like such a shitty issue. Like, we're just going to keep relitigating Donald Trump versus Hillary or Donald Trump versus Biden. And then again, like over and over and over again, ad nauseum at this point. Until
Hmm.
we have a viable third party candidate, which, let's face it, the Libertarians don't even have a candidate yet. And last I heard, it was still going to be like Vermin Supreme, who, you know, wants to give everybody a free pony and wears a fucking boot on his head. So, like, that's not viable, right? Like, that's the problem with the Libertarian Party. You know, there's a lot of infighting there. They fucking hate Dave Smith. There's like a couple of other guys out there. And this is where the Libertarian Party would be smart to actually attach itself to RFK, because he has at least a backing to him and he's getting good polling. He's at, I think, 24 or 25 states he has ballot access in. So this would be good for, it would be a good marriage for the two of them, even though RFK does not hold super strong libertarian values, in my opinion. But in order to possibly get to a viable third party in this country, and get the funding that they need by getting the 5% of the popular vote, it would be a good marriage between the Libertarians and RFK, in my opinion, just because Libertarians hold the ballot access already. So, like, then RFK doesn't have to spend whatever this woman's name is, like, her money on getting more ballot access. It would just be a better opportunity, I think, for RFK. Not that I'm advocating for him. There's a lot of issues with him I disagree on. But if he's going to do the damn thing, like, we got to do something. Like, this two-party system is not working anymore. And I think the last three elections are the perfect blueprint for showing that, like, this shit doesn't fucking work anymore and that we need viable options. Would you agree with that at least? I know you and I disagree with like a number of things when it comes to the government and politics, but I think you have to agree at least that we need new options. This is not okay anymore. Like, the elites being the elites, and that's Democrats, that's Republicans, it doesn't matter. The elites, we need to do something to, like, break up that power dynamic.
Yes, I agree with you. I think the Democrat Party is actually the oldest, I believe, political party uh, around today. Um, and that's, I think, for, I think that says a lot about them. But the Republican Party, on the other hand, is dying. And you need not look any further than this week. Trump announced he's selling a $60 Bible, um, based on America, selling an American Bible. That's who's running the show now. He is selling Bibles to you for $60, and I believe he's selling well, he sold the NFTs, obviously, like, fucking huckster.
He is a
So
huckster, 100%. So they actually, I heard this as well. Um, Basically, I believe this, like, super PAC started with, like, putting together funding, like funding events and shit like that. And
Mm.
ultimately, they came to an agreement with the RNC that like all of the money brought in has to first go to pay his legal fees before it gets sent anywhere else.
That's your
He
Republican Party.
he's literally going to be using it as a slush fund to pay his legal fees to basically get him to a point to the election. And he's hoping to just win the election, and then all of this will go away. All of it.
It's a real long shot, and it's
It's his only
only he
shot.
could, yeah, and only he could pull that one off. Worth noting too that in the mix with the Bibles was the stock ticker DJT.
Yes, Truth
Social
Social.
media platform went public and is like hovering around $72. This is
Oh, really?
I
It went up that much more? Because it was at 67 when I shared that screen grab with you of it. It
I
started
think
at like 70 or 72 and then dropped down to like 65, and now it's like up again. And we're
like
at
with
like
everything, he short
close to the end of the
circuits.
trading day.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think it might be already over. I don't know.
It's 4:30 here, so I think it go
Okay.
till 5 o'clock.
Yeah, it's indicative of how kind of cringy this whole thing is. You know, he added I think $4 or $6 billion on paper, not actual money, by doing that. So I don't know if you could sell the shares at a later point if he needs the money.
So he's stuck in like a period where he's not allowed to sell any shares.
Okay.
That is pretty standard for when a company IPOs, that you can't sell any of your shares because your highest trading point is typically going to be your first like couple of months likely because it's fresh, it's new, people want to trade it, see where it goes. So it's kind of like stock manipulation if you just sell your shares like right off the bat. But there was talk that they could like reduce that time frame for him so he could at least be able to sell the shares so he could get money to pay his fucking his bond.
Well, and that's kind of what I was getting at was that he was once again finding a new way to short circuit the system because now we got all these regulatory things getting involved, and it's like, can a president own a company? Do the blah blah
Right.
blah blah? It's like, oh, here we go again, like another weird thing,
But not
uncharted
only that,
ground.
we're having another look at a multi-tiered justice system. He had a $500 million bond, and it was knocked down to like $174 million. It's like a 60% plus decrease. I'm not a mathematician, so I don't fucking know if it's 60%, but that's roughly 60+% decrease in the amount of bond that you have to pay to like avoid jail time. And he has that. Like he just didn't have 500 million, but he did say, oh, he has $500 million cash on hand. He just didn't want to spend it because he might need it for his campaign.
I mean, to ask somebody to pay $500 million is also kind of fucked too. I don't want to
Uh,
defend him at all.
no, see, I'm not defending him in any capacity. Like
I know
I'm
you're
actually
not.
doing the opposite. Like, you know, if I had a bond like that, they're gonna throw my ass in jail. Like they're not
Yeah,
gonna
of course.
reduce my bond to allow me to be able to pay it. That that's two-tier justice. Like if he can't pay his fucking bond, he needs to be in jail. That's what happens. Okay,
Well,
and
or has something seized, but how do you seize 48% of a building? Like that's short
so
circuiting the system, like
uh,
another issue.
apparently one of the things that they are concerned about, and Mr. Wonderful, the Shark Tank guy, actually said this, is that this is bad news for New York.
Kevin
Because if,
O'Leary.
yeah, Kevin O'Leary, that's his name. If they start like seizing assets and stuff in New York, he's like, we're all just going to stop doing business there.
Yeah.
And so like this is a financial issue for the state of New York, because if people start pulling their, multi-billion-dollar companies out of the state, they're going to lose out on a fucking shit ton of tax revenue. There's going to be a lot of lost jobs. I mean, they're already having enough issues dealing with all the migrants getting bused there. They can't have a financial crisis on their hands because they already kind of have one. So, like, if you just further deepen that financial crisis, they're fucked. And that's kind of what everybody's banking on in terms of like dealing with Donald Trump at this point, because whether you like it or not, he has a ton of properties and businesses in New York. And the reason why he hasn't been able to get his bond is most of his money is actually in property. And insurance companies don't like to use property like that as collateral.
Yeah, it makes
Because
sense
the
because
market
what are they going to do with
fluctuations.
it? Yeah.
Right. Because to them it's a black stain, right? Because like yeah, sure, you take it over, but then you have to like do the upkeep to it,
you have to pay the taxes on it.
right? So I mean,
Um,
there's lots of problems there for the insurance companies. That's why they won't touch it. He went to 30 different insurers and nobody would touch it. It was too much. It's way too
I
much.
mean, it is well, it is.
It's the
Okay,
highest bond that has ever been sought. I think the most an insurance company has ever done was like 90 million. Something
it
like
couldn't
that.
happen to a
I
nicer
heard that
guy.
figure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what everybody deserves. Because now, yeah, you're like Kevin O'Leary says, you're creating a situation where doing business in New York is untenable, and then I want to use that opportunity to bounce around the country. Did you see this story from California? Speaking of untenable business, that Newsom was pressuring a regulator to cancel drilling permits for oil.
No, I did not. Interesting. Fun.
Yeah. So I guess that we when we were going through those high gas prices, we are again here in California.
Everywhere.
There's yeah. His solution was to give you a pittance of a rebate at the end of the year to
Yay.
cover. Uh-huh. And only for certain amount of for people who make under a certain amount of money. And then today just came out that in sort of a bombshell, the ex regulator for whatever alphabet agency this was in California. I had never heard of it before, but it's an energy gig. That he was being pressured not to issue new permits, while at the same time, uh, that the price increase crisis was happening. And now he's suing the state of California. So
I mean, I guess it makes sense. California is supposed to be at the forefront of the whole climate change, like getting rid of fossil fuels and shit. So I guess it makes some sense.
but it leads into my thought that, like, it's big enough that you'll make, like, companies won't leave because it doesn't make any sense, right? But really, doing business in California, if you're like an insurer, for example, where policies have tripled, um, I don't know why anybody would do business in California anymore. Like,
I
why
don't
isn't the
know.
market corrected for that? I don't. Maybe it just hasn't been enough yet.
The whole insurance thing is kind of wild because, like, even in Florida, so obviously diametrically opposed states here between California and Florida, rates in Florida have like tripled, and there's only like two insurance companies in Florida now that are willing to insure property. Um, it's a real fucking problem. Actually, insurance across the board is up. Car insurance everywhere is going up. I mean, I got like a $6 reprieve for adding my wife to my insurance policy, which is kind of weird in my opinion. But
Mm-hmm.
then it promptly shot back up like another $5 or $6 a month, like within 2 months. They're finding every reason to just hit your pocketbook, and it's across the board. I mean, they're trying to say inflation is down. I don't believe the core CPI numbers are down.
I think it went up like a
Yeah,
little, maybe.
inflation has actually been rising again, it seems. So just in time for fucking election season. Not that that's going to help anything. As we saw, the federal government just passed a $1.2 trillion spending so that they can stay alive for another 6 months, right? Six
Uh,
months, 1.2 trillion for 6 months.
well, I haven't looked at what everything in that bill was. I know there were cuts to some things, and there was some political bullshit in there, like not flying the pride flag over U.S. embassies
Yeah.
overseas. Which, I'm
Kind of
I'm kind of the
hilarious.
opposite. It is kind of hilarious because I was thinking like, well, you're saying no to all of it, either yes or no to all of them. Like, you should be able to, if you want to fly that pride flag, fly it in like, what I'm getting at, like in Middle East
So
countries.
the president doesn't have line item veto power. I believe that was changed. Like he doesn't actually have that power. He has to basically sign or not sign a bill. He can't veto line items. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I
But
don't believe so. No.
but basically Biden said that he's going to sign the bill,
Oh yeah, totally.
and then he's gonna fight to roll back the not flying the pride flag thing. So like we see where his fucking priorities are.
I was about, but just took the words right out of my mouth. It says so much that he's like, this can't stand. We've got to fly that pride flag in the United Kingdom at the embassy, but not Saudi Arabia. No, we can't do it there. But we could do it at some places. It does show a lot of good, like, solid hypocrisy, and it also shows just, where we're at here, which is like, we gotta get that pride flag back up.
It's
I'm like,
identity
dude,
politics. Like, dude, this country has so much fucking trouble, like, that it's in. And you're sitting here, you want to fund initiatives like that, and, like, still funding fucking Ukraine and Israel and, like, all this fucking funding to other countries. And I think part of why people are kind of starting to push back, like the general public push back on funding Ukraine, which you and I again are diametrically opposed on, and pushing back on, it's like 50+ percent of Democrats want to stop funding Israel, or at least tie some kind of constraints to the funding for Israel and stuff like that. I think people are starting to realize, like, we're sending all this fucking money overseas, and there's so many problems here at home where that money could actually do some good. And
or
I
maybe it
think,
wouldn't do some good.
well, no, when you give the government money and they try to spend it on something, it never really goes well, does it? So, that's the point of private enterprise. But I think people are kind of like of the opinion now that, like, this can't keep going on. Money isn't infinite, dude. Like, the government just got to a point. I was telling you this the other day. I was reading that with all of the tax revenue we take in, we are only now able to cover the interest payments on the national debt. That's it.
Yeah.
Interest. So we will never pay that debt off. Basically, the U.S. is in the same position that people with student loan debt are. They can only fucking pay the interest and never off the principal. So they're going to learn a fucking lesson. Probably not, actually. And they're just going to keep spending us into oblivion.
8 years is probably the shortest amount of time we have left before we hit that breaking point. I think it's 2032.
Yeah, but you know what comes before 2032?
No, what? Should I be worried?
2026, 250 years. We talked about this 2 podcasts ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, good point. Okay.
So why worry about funding? Why? Like, what? Just keep spending. Just keep spending. Why
Well,
worry about it? I mean, we only
that
got a
show,
couple years left.
yeah, that show, The Three Body Problem, is basically about something about this, which is like, these aliens are coming to our Earth and they're going to destroy the planet. And we have 400 years. It's going to take them 400 years to get here, like 420 years. And so there are people who are like, why are we trying to build the nuclear spaceship probe thing now? We could use that money here on Earth to help people. It's 400 years away. And then it's like, well, that you can't just say like it's 8 years away. It's plenty of time to solve it. It's going to be here before we know it. We should probably talk about Israel a little bit, because the IDF just said that they were going to provide cover, a security bubble for this fucking pier. They're going to build a pier without having American troops on the beach, and the IDF is going to secure that area. this thing seems fucking nuts, dude. I want to be like the first to be on record to say like this is all bad. The entire thing, like saying it at the State of the Union, bad idea. You shouldn't have done that. Doing a pier because you don't want to have anybody on the ground. Like, how the fuck you gonna get a fucking bulldozer there? How are you gonna do? I'm like, it's a logistical nightmare. You got to
Sure.
transport all that stuff there.
But
How much is it going to cost?
Israel wants this pier. They've already talked about using it to
Of
ship
course they want this pier
Palestinians away from Gaza.
Of course they want the pier. I don't blame them, honestly, because they have the entire world breathing down their neck to not finish the job right now. And the only way that they're going to be able to do that is if they get other countries to have some skin in the game, because they're on this on their own.
But they're not. They have the U.S. backing them.
Well, what I was going to say was this is their way of getting the U.S. like really involved, which is just a bad idea, because right now Egypt won't lift a finger. They won't do anything. That's one of the only reasons. And there's also this like myth that aid trucks don't get into Gaza, which isn't true at all.
There's no benefit for Egypt to do anything.
If I was Egypt, I wouldn't want to do it.
The only thing that Israel wanted from Egypt was for them to take Palestinians. They were like,
and they don't want them
out of here. They don't.
They're radicals. You have a stable country finally.
Virtually nobody wants them.
No, but that's the quiet part out loud, right?
It is, but it's the truth. Like, no country really wants them. So they have nowhere to go. There's no options. They can't leave the country. They can't go back home because all their homes have been destroyed. Honestly, there's no good options here. There's no good solutions.
No,
there's
it's
no
all
real
horrible
government. Like Netanyahu does not want a two-state solution. He also wants this war to go on as long as humanly possible, because the people in Israel do not want him in office anymore. But he's like, well, after the war. But there's no incentive for him to actually finish the job, or else he would have went into fucking Rafah already.
Okay, let's put that aside for 1 minute. That's something I do want to talk about as well. They could have elections at any time. The reason why they haven't is because the government is currently united against one thing, and that's to defeat Hamas. So if they thought that getting rid of Netanyahu would make Hamas go away, I guarantee you they would do it. I don't think that's how they're viewing it. The public, the war cabinet, the Knesset, all of it. That's what I think. Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand that. But
okay.
Our government was united in eliminating the Taliban and ISIS, which clearly hasn't happened since ISIS just attacked Russia. ISIS-K, whatever the fucking K stands for. But
what does that stand for?
I don't know.
I was like, it's
to find out.
It's like Special K, the cereal.
Like, our government was united for that. We still had elections.
Yeah, well, we have elections every 4 years.
It doesn't matter. It's a bullshit excuse. You can't have elections because your government's united in eliminating a terrorist organization, which, by all intents and purposes, does not seem like they've actually been able to accomplish.
Well, they have. They've eliminated them in the north. It's really Rafah, and
that I'm going to hold you to that. That's not true. If they eliminated them in the north, why the fuck did they have to raid the same hospital 4 times, saying that they were there? Because they didn't eliminate them in the north.
Well, I'm not saying like they 100% got rid of every bad guy in the north. What I'm saying is they did the operation in the north, and they took care of that. Now, when these guys come out of the tunnels, they went back to the hospital and set up an operation center.
So I have to say this, okay? The estimates of the number of Hamas fighters was about 10,000. Okay.
I thought it was 30.
I think it was 10.
Okay, let me look that up.
Yeah, you keep
going.
But the estimated amount of casualties so far is over 30,000. So have they?
They say 30,000 men.
30,000 men from Hamas.
Hamas for the army, yeah.
Okay.
So
they've already killed over 30,000 people, of which we know roughly half the population of Gaza is women and children. So,
the estimate I saw last was that they killed. Let's see. They think that the Gaza Health Ministry number includes 6,000 Hamas fighters. Trying to think of a way to phrase that correctly.
So, no, I understand what you're saying. So you don't believe the Gaza Health Ministry. I don't either, because that is a propaganda arm of Hamas, understandably. But you're willing to accept that number, but you aren't willing to accept the number of dead civilians because the same reason that they're a propaganda arm of Hamas. So we've had that discussion before about this, that you don't believe those numbers, but now you
I don't believe any of these numbers. No.
But would you believe numbers that come out of Israel?
No, but no and yes. Okay, so in the sense of like Israel said like, okay, this is how many people died on October 7th. And then they ended up revising that number down. Like a legitimate government doesn't just make the number keep going up and up and up. They don't ratchet it. You know, it's the only situation or the only time where a country has had to say like, we'll prove that the number went down. We don't have to say it went up. Especially during a mass casualty event, that's not usually like a common factor.
Right. But from everything that I've been hearing on this topic, okay, like Israel saying that there was like the fact that they went back to this hospital 4 times, that there was like Hamas fighters in there and stuff. They're allegedly, I don't know, this is just what I hear through different, like, various news places, that they have not actually produced any evidence that they existed within that. Okay. That's a big problem. There is video evidence of them dropping bombs on unarmed civilians. There is evidence of them opening fire into basically a demilitarized zone where people were allowed to cross to safety. Those are all facts. Israel has, as you know, just had the largest land grab that they've ever had in their entire existence, in the West Bank. Like, there's things here that are pointing towards ethnic cleansing and genocide. Obviously, the UN.
Nope.
Yes. The UN just passed a ceasefire resolution.
I don't give a shit what the UN does.
In the Security Council, okay, you have.
It's not a genocide, Brad. Genocides don't last 5 or 6 months.
Really? They don't.
How do you?
They don't.
What? This is the worst genocide ever. Worst genocide ever.
Only killed Jews in World War II over the span of like less than 5 or 6 months.
How is it a genocide, Brad?
Is that not a genocide?
Brad, how is it?
I gotta hear your fucking rationale for this.
Brad,
genocides don't last 5 or 6 months.
I know talking over me is a tactic, but it's not really working right now. I'm trying to tell you that
it's not a tactic. I'm calling out what you said. What you said is genocides do not last 5 or 6 months. Is that not what you said?
If they wanted to wipe out everybody in Israel or in Gaza, they could have done it already. That's genocide. They don't drop a warning on your building if they're genociding you. They don't let aid trucks in if they're genociding you. But they don't build a pier with a security bubble if they're trying to genocide them.
They're really not letting aid in. That's part of what the UN Security Council
fucking lie.
Just said.
The UN Security Council is fucking lying.
So you don't believe the UN should exist? Ultimately, is where you have to fall on this. You just said the UN doesn't mean shit.
I don't care what the UN says.
You don't care what they say.
The UN Security Council has Russia and China on it.
Okay, it also has every other fucking country that is available.
I don't care.
It doesn't have all 193 countries or whatever.
It has 8 or 9 countries, Brad. I don't know how many countries it has.
But you also say that the UN goes as the US goes. And that's obviously not true because the US abstained from that vote. They abstained.
That was a mistake. A mistake.
But the ICJ also says that there's more and more evidence that they are committing genocide. So now you have the UN Security Council and you have the ICJ. This is not necessarily, in my opinion, about stopping the genocide or whatever. Okay,
it's not a genocide.
Well, you are technically wrong because oh, dude, there's like a thumbs up bubble on my thing. Did you see that? That was weird.
What
Now, see
the
now,
heck?
yay, genocide. No, it was weird. It like popped up in my
Yeah, it did.
periphery. Did you see
Like
it?
it knew we did that. Yeah.
um, but if you have all of these countries saying that, and you have the ICJ saying that, you at least have to take more precaution and consideration. You just have to.
So
The,
this
the
is what I
fact
was
that
going
you're
to say
sitting here
before
saying
you.
that it's bullshit that they're letting aid in, there's virtually no aid coming in, dude. They've already found that
Yes, there
dude,
is.
there is almost 100% starvation rate right now
You. How do
in
you?
Gaza.
There's 115% starvation rate in Gaza. What does that fucking mean, Brad?
Well, you
What does
can't
that
have
mean? 100%
you can't have
starvation rate.
115%.
I know it. What I'm saying is it's all
There's
absurd. The whole
once
the whole notion that
100%
it
of
would be
people are
nearly
dead, then
100% of people
100%
are
of people are
absurd.
dead.
Yeah, there's also a famine there. They don't grow anything. Why would there be a famine if they don't even grow anything? That's a stupid word to use too. They let aid in. Where does the aid go? Who takes the aid?
I don't know. About 5 guys get killed by a fucking crate.
A crate. Well, I mean, this is what's so fucking frustrating is that the Palestinians would actually be better off if everybody else just let Israel eliminate Hamas. But they won't. Hamas knows what they're doing, by the way. This is very smart on their part.
Absolutely.
They know exactly what's going on at the UN Security Council. They know it's working to their benefit, and they know that time is on their side.
Yes.
And by the way, when you say all the countries in the world are all saying that Israel's bad, that is like the oldest trope in human history, to blame the Jews for something. You know, it's not their fault that they got attacked on October 7th when there was already a ceasefire in place. They didn't occupy Gaza for 18 years. It's not a land grab.
Not necessarily that it's their fault, but they knew about it and they did nothing to try to prevent it.
Fair enough. Every time I want to, I'm ready to criticize Israel for something, but every time I try to get to that point, you go and bring up the stupid shit about like the aid trucks or like the genocide that's supposedly happening. It's just not true. Now, you could say that a population of people is being negatively impacted by a war, and I would go, yeah, that's fine. I understand that. But it's not the Rwanda genocide where like an entire population of people just completely gets wiped out. It's not like that. I think it's a poor choice of words, and I think it's intentional. I think that's obviously why they put that in the resolution. They're playing games.
I mean, of course they're playing games, okay? The Palestinians know this, like you said. Hamas knows all of this. Okay, it's nothing new. The longer this drags out, the longer it actually benefits them. I'm sure they're not helping with the starvation and everything. You know, so like one of the things we saw, right, was the U.S. decided to cut funding to UNRWA, which is
for a year,
up through 2025, like completely.
Good.
Done.
Not long enough for
funding.
me,
but apparently, from what I heard, they did an investigation into UNRWA, and every one of those employees had been fired.
they fired a bunch of terrorists.
So
yes.
They were, I guess, helping Hamas. I don't know the full situation, to be honest. You and I have talked about it surface level, but ultimately they were members of Hamas, so they got fired. But UNRWA was the number one foundation providing aid into Gaza, and now you've cut that aid. I mean, I'm sure other countries are funding it, but the U.S. was probably the largest single funder of that organization. So,
it's a huge problem. Yeah, no. What I want to say is that Hamas was using UNRWA as like a shell company, basically. And that's something else. Look, I want to clarify
but we are not diametrically opposed here in the fact that Israel has every right to defend itself. Okay, but you are hearing it from U.S. officials too, that there is a right way and a wrong way to do this.
Okay, I don't have any faith that anybody in this administration knows what they're talking about, except for maybe John Kirby. And if you read between the tea leaves on whatever he's saying, if you read the tea leaves, you kind of get the idea that like we're playing politics. And Biden's playing re-election politics with Michigan and Dearborn. Fine, whatever. Let me do two things. One, let me criticize the Israeli government and say that one, they're doing a very bad job of communicating whatever information they have with the world. They are not. You're saying where is the evidence that this and this and this, right? You're right. Israel should try to explain what they've found. I guarantee you they've found some stuff. They have intel that they gathered from all these different places they raided, and they should be telling us what the fuck is going on there? What makes them think Rafah is this, right? You're saying, how do I know? And I'm saying you're probably right. That they should probably be better communicating that. The other thing about the genocide thing, I'm not saying genocides don't happen in 6 months or whatever. I'm saying that Gaza is like the size of Chicago, and if it was a genocide, it would be over. It would have been over months ago, and it's just not that. I just think that's the wrong word. That's it.
I mean, it might not be. I'm talking just in terms of what is out there, what we see. Okay, does not mean that these are my personal, like, this is my personal stance on this. My personal
People are calling it
stance,
a genocide. I know.
yes, Israel has every right to defend itself, just like the U.S. did after 9/11. Okay, but what the U.S. also did was go into Iraq under false pretenses. Like we all know that. We all know we didn't get rid of the Taliban. We actually went
We gave
into
the Taliban a country.
right. We actually went into a sovereign nation to assassinate Osama bin Laden. Not that I'm saying that was wrong necessarily, but we violated the sovereignty of a nation in order to do so. But they were harboring a terrorist. So what do you do? I'm not saying I have a perfect solution to that or to this. But I fully expect a country to defend itself against a terrorist attack. The problem here is this is much more of a sensitive situation than probably anywhere else in the world. This is centuries long battles between, obviously Arabs and Jews and stuff like that. Like this goes back way beyond anything we've ever seen before. So
Some people might say it's biblical.
it is. I mean, there's huge issues here at hand, and you and I aren't going to solve these issues. They don't necessarily affect us personally.
No, I like talking about them with you.
Yeah,
That's what we do.
They give us an opportunity to discuss this stuff. It'll be
Can
interesting to see what happens. Because apparently, I didn't know this. Israel's supposed to be this like really well defended and like kind of technologically advanced country.
I mean, it
But
is, but obviously it
but
isn't as well.
apparently, without U.S. funding, they wouldn't even have like half of what they have in terms
I
of
know.
capability. So it's like the
Yeah.
U.S. is totally propping up their military, which I didn't
Okay,
know before. I thought they kind of had like their own,
so here's the thing. Israel didn't have the backing of America until after they won the war against Egypt, and there was peace with Egypt. It wasn't until after that that we started selling them arms, and that Iron Dome came around, like 15 years ago or whatever it was. And yeah, we give them F-35s and stuff. Yes. Now, Israel needs to figure that out now. Israel, I think they finally realized that they can no longer count on every other country, including whatever Canada does. Who knows? Maybe they ship them like a gun a year. I don't know. But
some maple syrup.
Maple syrup guns. Maybe America is too politically volatile now in this day and age for them to count on us. I would say that goes for every other country, especially NATO ones. Maybe they can no longer count on us. And I do want to say, gosh, there was one other thing you mentioned that I wanted to address, which was that you asked why they haven't gone to Rafah yet. And my answer to you is, I think they're doing two things. One, they're planning for it because it's going to be
It's going to be
urban
big.
warfare like there's
Yeah, it's going to be
never
big.
been before. And that Hamas today actually just said they are eagerly anticipating the IDF. They are now ready for it. They gave them enough time that they're ready. And the other thing I think they were trying to do is thread a needle where they're negotiating for the hostages with the United States and Qatar and Egypt.
Right.
And I think that they are trying to make sure they exhaust that last avenue before they go in and probably end up they're going to lose all the hostages, I think.
So apparently another one of the things that we have not really seen, which I agree with, is the actual losses that the IDF is experiencing in these skirmishes and stuff with Hamas. Apparently it seems that part of their strategy is just to keep rolling out tanks like right into RPG fire. And that clearly does not go well for the IDF. But as we know, like they're keeping everything under wraps, so I guess it's not like super surprising. But I would be interested to see what the numbers are of their like losses.
We won't know that number. I don't think it's
Probably ever.
as high as you would expect because they're fighting. This goes for Ukraine too. Ukraine is fighting a war that's never been fought before. Unless you're like really following it granularly, you're not going to know that they've adopted drone warfare, modern drone warfare. It's pretty interesting.
They're
And
literally like
Israel's
dropping grenades on people, like hand grenades
right.
from drones, which
Yeah.
is pretty interesting. It's
Yeah.
pretty new. I mean, like we have
It's
drones,
new.
obviously, but it's way different than what they're using. Like it's
Yeah,
like
we've
more
never used them
small
in
drone,
combat.
like small drone warfare, not like
Yeah,
the
and
Hellfire missile drones like we use.
yeah, and the IDF is fighting a certain kind of urban combat that hasn't really been done before because there's not really a war zone that's ever been composed of tunnels 40 feet underground.
Yeah.
And so it makes it's sort of an interesting new thing.
Well,
But I think all
Vietnam,
that said, they're doing
in
good.
Vietnam, there was tunnels all over the place. It was one of the big problems for the U.S. in
Oh,
Vietnam.
the
Was
Viet
that
Cong had like traps everywhere.
yeah, like they couldn't. And the jungle is way different, obviously, fighting in urban warfare. But yeah, they had a whole tunnel system in Vietnam, and that didn't work out so well for the U.S. So it's interesting to see because it's like a combination of like Vietnamese warfare fighting on, from tunnels and stuff, but also having the urban warfare aspect. So you're right. These are two wars that are being fought interestingly in different manners.
Mm-hmm.
And what the U.S. learns from this the next time we get into whatever the hell we're getting into, we'll be interested to see the lessons learned from that.
I really hope that the weakness on the global stage right now doesn't impact our ability to eventually fight a war, which I'm afraid is less clear than it's ever been. I'm thinking about China mainly, but
I think part of this, right, because there was a funding bill that actually sent money to Taiwan, Israel, and Ukraine all at
yeah.
once before this last bill or whatever was put forward. And back in 2023, we saw articles coming out that the U.S. is actually kind of depleting its munitions. So that's problematic on our part. We still have to provide all these weapon systems and stuff, but we're still depleting ourselves as a whole. So at some point, I mean, like, we have to put ourselves in a position to defend ourselves, right? And we spend, what is it, like 20 times the amount of any other country below us on military. Now that shows itself in military might. We have like the most aircraft carriers. Like China just got its like fourth aircraft carrier ever. So that they're gearing up. I think you shared something. There's a town in China, I think it was,
in
right?
Mongolia,
that is
but it's part of China.
exactly shaped like Taiwan. So they're kind of like
the presidential palace in Taiwan.
Yeah, so they're like probably practicing to invade Taiwan. So
if I was them, I would do it now.
right.
Sadly.
I mean, Well, you're not wrong. If they were smart, now would be the time because we are spread thin with what we're doing. Um, I think that's very well known that the U.S. is spreading itself too thin. Um, but that's kind of again what we talked about. Part of like the fall of empires is the fact that too much expansion leads to not being able to defend everywhere, and then you have breakups of like smaller portions of what you owned before. Like it just, I don't know, man. World politics is really fucked right now, as we well know. World politics is really tough.
Before we close up shop for the day, what did you think of that Moscow uh, attack? I mean, that was like kind of crazy, but
Well,
almost not surprising.
Putin sounds nutty because he's sitting here saying that these ISIS guys, they are Ukraine, and that they had like an opening to go into Ukraine to escape Russia and everything. Um, the whole thing's really weird because like Putin allowed video to be released of them. Like, I wouldn't say torturing these guys necessarily, but trying to get confessions from them and stuff.
I
And
mean, one of the guys did have a battery attached to his genitals.
right, I mean, oh, what
Yeah.
really? I didn't see that part.
Oh, there was one of them had their ear cut off and they were forced to eat their own ear.
But I think they killed like 150 people total from smoke inhalation and
Astronomical.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
like they killed a whole bunch of people. Um, it's interesting to me that ISIS is still around. Like, obviously, the U.S. did what it could to eliminate ISIS. Trump still says, "Oh, I killed all of ISIS," but clearly you didn't. Because the problem is you can't kill an ideology, really. Like, you would have to completely wipe all of those people off the face of the planet, and that's virtually impossible. Um,
Well, I
eh,
guess ISIS is back in Afghanistan again, and that the Taliban are actually fighting ISIS in Afghanistan, which uh, don't don't ask me to make sense of that one.
But I
I
mean, there's
guess
there's issues. Obviously, Russia was in Afghanistan. They're in Syria. They're kind of doing the same thing that the
I
U.S.
could see
does.
them repeating what Afghanistan again. I could see them easily doing something there.
Yeah, I mean, if ISIS is there and they want to go do that, I don't know that they're focused on it. But who knows with this terrorist attack, and if there's more in Russia, um, because they're throwing everything that they can at Ukraine. Supposedly there's like over 500,000 troops in Ukraine right now. It's the last number I saw, which is a lot of fucking people.
Well, this would get a new draft if he used the terrorist attack as a way to, as just like he did with the apartment bombings before they went to Chechnya. If he just used this as like an excuse to draft more people,
It's possible, but we were seeing he drafted all these people from the prisons, like violent
they're all dead
criminals
now.
that
Yeah.
had to go into Ukraine. But not only that, they were like raping and killing their own people on the front lines. Like,
Hmm.
because that's what happens when you take violent criminals and put them in a even more violent situation. Like, I mean, I it's an interesting situation, and I'll be tuning in to see what happens there because I don't think Putin's done in that regard.
All right. This was a very depressing conversation. Would you like
They
to try
all
to end it
are.
on something positive?
What do you
Um,
have, Captain Positivity?
uh, let's see. Well, I finished Three Body Problem on Netflix. And I think that half of that show is really good, and then the second half is kind of not so good.
So I just watched the trailer for that. It looks like it starts off as like a cop thriller, like murder kind of situation, right? Like they're investigating these murders, and then it turns into like alien invasion, something or other. And
It's
I
a
don't know
lot,
if I can get
actually.
behind it. I plan on watching it though. I just don't
Well,
know.
the book it's rather faithful to the book, but the book takes place in China and it's by a Chinese author, so they move characters around the world. But what happens is that the scientists start dying, and then they're trying to figure out why, and then that leads to a lot of other things. So it's not hard sci-fi I would say. It's more like hard science in parts, like hard physics, let's say. But there's not, you don't see an alien in the show, for example. Like, it's not
Okay.
that kind of show. It's something different.
Yeah, I plan on
But
watching
also,
it.
it's also kind of a character drama, and so that's where it's the weakest, I think, where it's like, hi, we're all very attractive people. Let's get together and discuss science. And you're like, nope, bullshit, not buying it. So there's problems with that, but I don't know.
Yeah,
That's what I've been watching.
I'll check it out.
It's the first thing I've been watched in years.
You said you didn't want to talk about anything depressing, so I'm not going to talk about what I just watched.
What would you watch?
It was all those kids getting diddled by those Nickelodeon guys.
Maybe we could talk about that next time because I'm going to watch that.
You should.
Or maybe we should never talk about it again. I don't know.
That too.
Well, was it good?
It was. It was.
Okay.
In a more positive light, I'm going to the Kentucky Derby this year for the
Congratulations.
150th Kentucky Derby. It's actually part of these sunglasses here. They match my Derby outfit.
Oh, okay. So you're going to dress like a Southern gentleman?
You'll find out.
Okay, cool. Something similar to that is like Augusta. I would love to go to Augusta.
Nice.
For that tournament, but maybe someday. 150.
150th, yep.
Wow. That's a very old institution.
It is. And pretty much every distillery is releasing some kind of like 150th anniversary bottle of bourbon, so I'll probably go broke.
And then we're about 3 weeks away from the NHL playoffs. So
amen.
We're about to start the run.
Let's kick it off.
It's been 1 year. I'm very excited for that. Okay, well, why don't we wrap it up, and I'll catch you next time.
All right, buddy.
All right, bye.
Peace.